Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial. I'm Dylan Turner. Today I'm gonna make a game as fast as possible. It took me about an hour, I want to say, looking at the clock. Um, and the goal of today is to just write and explain how to make a simple little 2D platform game in the Godot engine, something I've been playing around with a lot lately. I've really enjoyed it. So with that said, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is just simply create a project, pick where it's going to be, and everything like that. And I'm just going to set up not just the project, but just add places for the resources to go. So things like the images, the scripts. When we animate things or make tile sets, it's going to give us a resource file that we can reuse. I like to save those. I'll put them in a little like animations folder. I'll also place for objects that we can drag in. So once we've edited and added scripts to an object, we can reuse that object over in a actual like scene, like an actual room. But with that all set up, I actually want to get started. Open up GIMP here and just try and design a character. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I really make anything is I'm going to pick a nice color palette. There's this great website called Coolers, and what it does is basically just auto generates a bunch of color sets for you to pick from. So I'm just gonna pick this one that I think is kind of nice, and then I'm gonna start with the character. When I'm making a character, kind of the first thing that I want to do is just kind of draw out a vague shape and just kind of doodle, and eventually that ends up with something. So in this case, I kind of got a guy, and I thought he looked kind of like a farmer. Um, So yeah, so I made him look more like a farmer. I gave him a little plaid shirt and everything like that. Um, and yeah, so there's a character. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Just fit it in your color scheme, and then now I get to animate it. So the first thing we're going to do is resize the image, give us more space to work with. Um, Essentially what you need to do for this is I'm just going to do a very simple 4 frame walk animation. So you have left foot forward, standing, right foot forward, standing, and that just goes back and forth. And so we'll have that going to the left, we'll have that going to the right. I'm also going to add a jump animation and a fall animation because it looks really snappy when you're making a platformer if you have a fall animation. So we'll need 4 tiles to the right and 4 tiles below that, and then we'll need another 4 tiles below that. So I could make it 4x3, but I decided to make it 4x4. But yeah, so you can see I'm just going to animate and slowly get a character animation working. Just very, very simple because, like I said, this is just for the tutorial. Each one is 32 by 32, and they're all evenly spaced so that I can nicely clip it when I'm in Godot. So yeah, and then there you go. So next we're going to move on to tiles. And with tiles, it's kind of the same thing. We have a set of specific tiles that we need to make. We're going to have a block. We're going to have a middle space, and we're going to have like 4 corners of space, and we can kind of build a world map built on that. And so you'll see that's what I'm doing right here is I'm just designing this tile, again sticking with our color scheme so it all matches nicely. And once we get that, then we are done and we can move on to actual Godot. So in Godot, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new scene that's going to hold our player. It's going to hold our player's the physical player object. It's going to hold that object's collider, and it's also going to hold our sprite work that we're going to draw over it. Um, so we're going to do that, and then after we add the sprite, we're going to create a new sprite animation clip, basically, and we're just going to add in all the different clips that we have. So we have the stand right, stand left, walk right, jump left, jump right, fall left, fall right. And then later we're going to animate all of those. So we're just going to go through and we're going to use their little tile menu editor, and you can just say how many sprites there are. In our case, we have 4x4 because we left in a space in case we wanted to add more sprites later. So you just select your animations, and after a certain point, you have your animation selected, and we can start messing around with our player. So I'm going to leave that be, and I'll add scripts later. I'm going to go create the other object that we need, which is the tile map. And so the deal with the tile map is that we're going to basically do a similar thing, but instead of creating a spider animator, we're going to use the tile map editor, which means you also have to add collisions to these things. So you'll see me clicking through collisions. It's right about here that when I started placing them, I realized that I actually need more tiles. So I have to go back and add tiles for the straight parts, like the in-betweens. So you'd have a left corner, then you'd have like a top, then you'd have a right corner on a hill. And with that, we can actually make a little game world. So that's what I'll do. And now that we have a little place for our character to go, we can actually work on the code. In the player code, we're going to set up a few little variables like speed and gravity that we'll be able to change in the editor. That's what the export does. We're going to make them floating point numbers, so they're decimals, so they can be a little nicer. We'll just give them some default values that are nice. I know we'll also need to get a reference to the sprite, and so we'll add it as we go. So in the ready function, we want to make sure we set the sprite to be idle at the start, right? And we need a velocity. So basically we're going to change this velocity variable based on input and based on gravity. So over time it adds gravity, and then the horizontal position is based on the input. And we're going to set that up later to use stick and keyboard, but for now we can just know that there's going to be some sort of input function. And so yeah, you'll set it up so that if the input function returns a y value that is positive, then that means we're trying to jump, and then we can set the x position to be just that. And so then in this input function, we can set up inputs using this thing called the strength. And the strength is basically an analog value for the number instead of just on or off, right? So this way we can use controller inputs and keys. So in the input manager, we'll go ahead and add up, down, left, right. And actually I'm going to change that to jump instead of up and down, and we'll change that in the code to fix that too. We'll add a jump system. And yeah, just like that, we have an input system that should give us some value. So let's go ahead and try that out. And it doesn't quite work because of gravity and things. And I realize that it's because it's facing the wrong way. So I go ahead and fix that, and we have some physics. And then I can kind of just play around and adjust them just a little bit until I get something nice. And then we can move on to animations. So for the animation, really all we're doing is with the names that we set up in our little animator sprite thing earlier, we basically want to set the sprite.animation member variable. We want to set that to be equal to a string of that name. And really all that is just a bunch of if statements based on speed, the current facing direction, and other things. And that's really it for as far as the animation is concerned. And there we go. Now we can walk around, we can jump around. I still feel like it's missing something. I might want to add like a double jump or something just to show how it's done. But yeah, you can see the animation. Oh, actually, he doesn't flip around like he's supposed to. So I'll fix that real quick. The only thing we have to do is just basically, instead of changing the velocity in the animation, or instead of changing the facing direction in the animation function, we'll put that up in some more updated code. It's not just in the specific if statement when he's on the ground walking. That way, when you're in the air and you change direction, you change direction. So we'll just add a little function here real quick, and yeah, so that'll be that. And from here on out, it's basically just tweaking those physics variables. I kind of like where they're at though. And so yeah, like I said, I'm going to add a double jump. So what you do is basically you add a bool for whether or not he already has double jumped. And then if you're in the air and you haven't double jumped, then it just does the same thing as jumping. So it's just another option to get a jump in. And then we will make it reset when it's on the ground. And yeah, now we got a double jump. And we got a little minimal sprite work. I mean, obviously all this could be cleaned up, but like the fundamentals are there. We have a character, it moves. So yeah, that's it. Everything else is just personal preference tweaking, and then designing levels, designing enemies, things like that. But as far as the physics are concerned, we have a player.